CBS News, I'm Bill Whitney. The weather at Cape Canaveral has cleared, and the latest space shuttle mission appears headed for an on-time liftoff an hour from now. We have an update from Frank Motek.
7 astronauts, including a Florida congressman, have taken their seats in the shuttle Columbia in preparation for blastoff at 7 o'clock Eastern Time this morning. NASA spokesman Hugh Harris says Mother Nature appears to be cooperating with the launch plans.
The weather has improved greatly from what we thought it was going to be last night. We do have scattered low-level clouds and broken mid to high level. The wind's about 12 miles per hour is out of the north, gusting up to 25% chance of rain.
Technically, all systems are go. The countdown toward the first launch of Columbia in 2 years is proceeding smoothly. Frank Motek for CBS News at the Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
And we're right now about 2 minutes away from launch. It was nail-biting time all morning this morning as the cloud cover over Cape Canaveral made it, just took it down to the wire before we finally decided that we could launch this morning. We do have, we do have the cloud cover clearing up now, and it looks like we will be able to get the launch off on time.
Pressurization of flight level is underway.
We're looking at a 5-day mission for the shuttle Columbia this time. This is the first time Columbia has flown in more than 2 years, so they've been checking it out as if it were a new shuttle.
The shuttle main engines are ready to start.
And we did have a 1-day delay in the launch because there were a few glitches and bobbles and little gremlins they wanted to make sure were totally out of the system before they did launch the shuttle. This one has another politician on board, Florida Congressman Bill Nelson. He'll be up there, and he'll actually be participating in some experiments. There's a crystal growing experiment, growing crystal proteins in space for cancer research that he'll be participating in.
We're coming up on the T-minus 1 minute mark.
And also the other important member of this crew, Franklin Chang Diaz. He's the first Hispanic American astronaut.
The system is now armed.
55 seconds now away from launch.
53 seconds in counting. Hydrogen burn igniters have been armed. The igniters will be fired at T-minus 10 seconds.
We still do have some cloud cover, but that has cleared up enough to launch the shuttle this morning. They were concerned about being able to return to the Cape should a major problem occur right after launch.
Seconds. Orbiter computers have positioned event doors to the launch configuration. Coming up on auto sequence start. Minus 31 seconds.
Yeah, let's go for auto sequence start.
We have a go for auto sequence start. Columbia's general purpose computers now have primary control.
And that means we are on our way, 22 seconds away from the launch now. We will be getting this 5-day mission started in just a few moments
Minus
now.
16 seconds. Everything is go. The orbiter's onboard computers have armed the SRB ignition.
We have cutoff.
We have a cutoff.
Uh-oh, we've stopped. We've stopped at T-minus 14 seconds.
T-minus 14 seconds. Ground launch sequencer tracing is in progress.
Okay, we have scrubbed, it looks like we've scrubbed the launch for today. The launch stopped at T-minus 14 seconds.
1, 2, and 3 showing purge 3. Ignition set ordnance safe. Go for orbiter APU shutdown.
We do not know why it shut down at this point.
Procedures being put into effect at this time to shut down the orbiter's APUs.
The arm that will bring the crew out of the shuttle has swung back to the shuttle.
Back in a position against the orbiter.
So the crew can exit as quickly as possible. There is no sign of any danger at this point, no fire, no problems at all. We do not know, but right now the shuttle, this countdown stopped.
Unexpected cutoff for the countdown at T-minus 14 seconds.
Go ahead, OTC. Okay, can you verify ready for the APUs to be shut down? I can verify that, OTC. Okay.
Now, NASA officials are going through the standard procedure to shut down everything. Right now, let me emphasize this point. There is no obvious problem, no danger to the crew, but we did stop at T-minus 14 seconds, and we don't know why.
APU shutdown being put into work. All safety procedures are going smoothly. No indication of any problem. No indication at this time of what caused the premature cutoff of the countdown.
So after all the nail-biting and waiting all morning long for the clouds to cover, cloud cover to clear.
The order's computers are in charge.
The launch stopped at 14 seconds away from takeoff.
Automatically stops the auto sequence.
Everything going as procedures. They rehearse these, and there seems to be no problem at this point. The crew will be taken off the shuttle as quickly as possible, but let's emphasize there is no danger to them at this point, as far as we can tell.
Complete.
And so that's the situation here. After waiting all morning long for the cloud cover to clear, the launch was stopped. The computers on board the shuttle stopped the launch automatically 14 seconds away. We do not know. We will be updating the situation for you as soon as we know. But the shuttle did not launch 14 seconds away. Live from the Johnson Space Center, Sue Davis, KTRH News Radio 740.
Thank you, Sue. KTRH News Time, 6:56.
Close, but no cigar for Space Shuttle Columbia. In Minneapolis, a woman receives an artificial heart. The Philippine Supreme Court gives Marcos his way. This is Bill Whitney with the CBS World News Roundup.
T-minus 16 seconds. Everything is go. The orbiter's onboard computers have armed the SRB ignition. We have cutoff. We have a cutoff. We have a cutoff at T-minus 14 seconds.
Within seconds of launch, the first flight of Space Shuttle Columbia in 2 years had to be delayed. Frank Motek of CBS radio affiliate WINZ was covering the countdown. Frank, what can you tell us?
After the clouds cleared away, the technical problems came. Bill, the countdown clock for the launch of Columbia was abruptly halted with just 14 seconds left. There's still no firm word on what caused the surprise stop of the countdown clock. The refurbished shuttle Columbia was to take off on America's 10th space shuttle mission of this year. The 7 astronauts on board Columbia were in a festive mood this morning. They were wearing their Santa Claus hats, and everything looked fine technically. The weather was the main concern. And then the big surprise came 14 seconds before it was supposed to blast off this morning. The launch had been delayed from its original launch time of 7 o'clock Eastern time because of the weather. NASA decided to go, and then the surprise abrupt abort of the launch today, and it appears that there will be no launch of Columbia on its 7th flight. Frank Motek for CBS News at the Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
CBS News, I'm Bill Lynch. In just over an hour, Space Shuttle Columbia is scheduled to lift off on the first manned mission of 1986. Frank Motek of Miami affiliate WINZ is watching the countdown at the Florida spaceport.
The flagship of America's space shuttle fleet is poised on the launch pad, ready for launch at 7:05 Eastern Time this morning. The countdown toward the launch at dawn continues to move along smoothly, and no problems are reported. The 7 shuttle astronauts, including a Florida congressman, are on board Columbia making final preparations to launch the shuttle on its first mission in nearly 2 years. As far as the weather goes, no problem. A clear sky, excellent visibility, and a temperature in the 40s are expected for launch time. The NASA team says it's confident that the problem which caused last month's cutoff of Columbia's countdown just 14 seconds before blastoff during the launch try on December 19th has been fixed. NASA spokesmen are optimistic that Columbia will start the New Year's shuttle schedule with an on-time launch this morning. Frank Motek for CBS News, Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
Second point in holding, and apparently they're going to hold for right now until they can fix whatever problem it has. We will be back with you to bring you the launch slide just as soon as they resume the count. Live from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, Sue Davis, KTRH News Radio 740.
Counting. 3 hits on 18 launch. Always pressure number 1, 2, and 3. And they are now showing within limits. Okay, looks like,
this will be the first of 15 space shuttle launches scheduled in 1986. NASA is calling this year the Year for Space Science. NASA hopes this year is one in which mankind learns more about the universe than any year in history. And this mission will start it off. They are carrying what they call a potpourri of science experiment. Still counting. T-minus 54 seconds.
Looks beautiful on the launch pad, doesn't it, Dick?
It really is a pretty sight. Dawn breaking. In the background, behind the launch pad, a crescent moon. Columbia ready to go. In front of us,
T-minus 37 seconds, but expecting to hold at T-minus 31 seconds.
Why the hold, Dick? Is that built in?
That is not a built-in hold. It has something to do with the launch.
At T-minus 31 seconds, pending resolution of some additional problems.
They have certain launch criteria, Sam, that they follow in order to launch this vehicle. Almost all the time it deals with safety concerns. They have numerous redundant systems on it to ensure that everything is safe, and this apparently is one of those glitches. They want to make sure that the crew is safe and the vehicle ready to go for a 5-day trip into space. We are at T-minus 31 seconds. The voice of launch control is Jim Ball. Hopefully he'll fill us in with a little more detail as to why we have this hold. This is not a built-in hold. On our TV monitors here at the press site, we can see Gene Thomas, who is the launch director, looking a little bit concerned. And on the launch pad, Columbia, ready to go.
Dick, can they hold or put as many holds in as often as they need to?
Seconds is indication of low temperatures in one of the engine lines.
Okay, there you have the reason. There are low temperature in one of the engine lines, and the answer to your question, Sam, is yes. They can hold throughout their launch window. In other words, they have a certain time period in which they have the opportunity to send this thing up into space. As long as they're within that launch window, they can hold. T-minus 31 seconds in holding. They're having a lot of trouble getting this Columbia off the ground. This started back on December 18th. It was initially to have gone. Weather stopped that launch. Then on December 19th, the crew...
we have only about 2 minutes, 14 seconds remaining of available time in which a decision needs to be made. At this point, we're still holding at T-minus 31 seconds.
What does that mean? They only have about 2 minutes to make a decision, Dick.
That's right. That means that's when that window is going to close for the first time. They will have another opportunity later this morning after that window closes, and the launch team and mission control in Houston will get together and decide.
Evaluating those time indications of the low temperature.
You're hearing a lot of...
We are prepared to proceed.
All right, it sounds like we have a green light from the launch team here at
Maxing out the reading at this time. We are prepared to proceed. Indication was of a low temperature in one of the engine lines from monitoring instrumentation.
Now, presumably, when we resume...
Indication from shuttle project engineer is that we should be able to proceed.
We will resume the countdown where it
stands. That is a no-go.
Oh, cancel that. It looks like this Columbia is going absolutely nowhere this morning.
Did we hear no-go?
We heard no-go. Not a good way to start off 1986 for NASA and the Space Shuttle program. A no-go. Let's see if we can find out why.
Final decision made is that we are no-go at this time.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. The first of 15 scheduled launches of the Space Shuttle. No-go at T-minus 31. The countdown stopped.
What we're going to do is recycle the count to the T-minus 9-minute mark. We have held at T-minus 31 seconds. We are going to recycle the count to T-minus 9 minutes as continuing evaluation of this indication of low temperature in one of the lines is continuing.
All right, there you have it. They will turn the countdown clock back to T-minus 9 minutes, and we're going to try it again a little later on.
Any idea what time that would be, Dick?
Don't yet. We're still evaluating that, Sam. We'll have to be back to you. It would be within this next hour. We'll be back to you as soon as we know when this countdown will resume at T-minus 9 minutes. Reporting live at the Kennedy Space Center, this is Dick Giuliano.
The year's first shuttle launch is touch and go. High-level MIA talks get underway in Hanoi. Libya's Gaddafi threatens suicide attacks in the United States. Good morning, Bill Lynch with the CBS World News Roundup. For the third time in more than 2 weeks, technical problems are plaguing the launch of Columbia, the oldest orbiter in the U.S. shuttle fleet. On December 19th, with the same crew of 6 plus a congressman astronaut aboard, Columbia came within seconds of liftoff when NASA computers found a problem and shut things down. Today's problems arose moments before a planned 7:05 a.m. Eastern Time launch. Frank Motek of Miami affiliate WINZ reports from the Kennedy Space Center.
NASA managers still hope to try again to launch Columbia this morning following a series of problems which forced another last-minute cutoff of the countdown. All was proceeding smoothly toward an on-time launch. Then at just under 3 minutes till launch time, the countdown clock was halted because of a fuel valve problem. The clock was restarted and then stopped again with just 31 seconds left till blastoff. The problem the second time around was a fuel temperature problem which still has not been resolved. NASA managers are still evaluating when and if to restart the clock, which is now at T-minus 20 minutes. The chance to launch this morning extends until 9:01 Eastern Time. In the meantime, the 7 shuttle astronauts aboard Columbia are awaiting word on whether or not they'll blast into orbit today. Frank Motek for CBS News at the Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
From ABC News, I'm Joe Templeton. By now, the crew aboard the Columbia had hoped to be in orbit beginning their 5-day mission. The shuttle was to lift off nearly 2 hours ago, but a mechanical problem developed. The launch was put on hold while technicians tried to work things out, and then a short while ago, the official word came, no launch today. We get the latest now from ABC's John Lyons at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
The planned launch of Columbia has been canceled again. There were a number of pesky problems earlier this morning which delayed the original launch time. They tried to reschedule it, moving the window back to a planned launch which should have happened just before 9 o'clock Eastern Time. RCA, what they call the customer which owns a satellite on board, asked that they wait until tomorrow. They didn't want to launch that satellite today with the delay. John Lyons, ABC News at the Kennedy Space Center.
The Columbia is the oldest shuttle in the U.S. fleet, and for the last 2 years, the Columbia has been getting an overhaul. It's now an almost new spaceship, and the 7 crew members are hoping everything will go smoothly, that the shuttle will get away tomorrow morning. Liftoff time now scheduled for 7:05 a.m. Eastern Time. I'll have more after this. CBS News, I'm Bill Lynch. After running afoul of Murphy's Law 4 times in a month, Florida Congressman Bill Nelson and 6 other shuttle astronauts are again strapped in their seats in the orbiter Columbia. Frank Motek of Miami affiliate WINZ has this update from the Kennedy Space Center.
The flagship of America's space shuttle fleet is again ready for launch at 7:05 Eastern Time this morning. The countdown toward the second launch try in as many days continues to move along smoothly. Just as they did 24 hours before, the 7 shuttle astronauts, including a Florida congressman, climbed aboard the refurbished shuttle this morning in preparation for Columbia's first mission in 2 years. Technicians are confident that the problem which forced yesterday's last-minute scrub of the countdown has been resolved. The weather forecast improved overnight, but is still being watched closely because of a threat of cloud formation and showers at the Cape. If all goes as planned today, Columbia will spend 5 days in space, release a satellite, and conduct a variety of scientific experiments. Frank Motek for CBS News, Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
CBS News, this is Charles Osgood. NASA officials hope that the 4th time's the charm to launch the trouble-plagued shuttle Columbia. But weather appears to be a problem. Frank Motek of WINZ Miami is standing by at the Kennedy Space Center.
Clouds and scattered showers have spoiled an on-time liftoff for the shuttle Columbia this morning. The original launch time was 7:05 Eastern Time. Now NASA managers are waiting for the clouds over the Cape to clear in hopes of launching later this morning. The countdown clock remains stopped at T-minus 9 minutes. The chance to launch this morning extends until 8:25 Eastern Time. For the second day in a row, the anticipation is building at the Space Center, where as soon as the weather clears, we expect to see the flagship of the shuttle fleet blast its way into orbit. NASA technicians are confident that there will be no last-minute technical surprises which held up the shuttle yesterday and on the previous launch try in December. The crew is ready, waiting for the green light, and are prepared to go as soon as the weather clears. Frank Motek for CBS News, Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
With Dick Giuliano at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This mission has been having more than its share of problems. Mechanical yesterday, and today weather. Dick, can this bird fly?
Well, you know, people have suggested that Columbia was in mothballs for so long that may be the problem. Today it's not technical glitches, it's weather that is the big concern. There are low clouds hanging over the Kennedy Space Center, obscuring the runway, and Commander Hoot Gibson and pilot Charles Bolden need a good, clear view of runway 15 at the Kennedy Space Center in the event they need to make an emergency landing after liftoff. Also, overseas in a place called Dakar, Senegal, and in Morón, Spain, there is also bad weather. There are NASA runways at both these locations that the shuttle would use in the event of a problem after liftoff. 2.5 minutes after liftoff, if it needed to come back to Earth, it would return at either of these locations. Bad visibility at both those places.
So, Dick, when do we know if we can launch?
We don't know. It's indefinite. They're getting a lot of information in the firing room from weather forecasters. Also, astronaut Paul Weiss is airborne in a NASA T-38 plane, zooming in and out of the clouds and checking the runways, practicing landings.
So we have to wait it out. This has been a live special report from AP Network News and Space Shuttle Columbia.
Morning, Tuesday, January 7th, 1986. Good morning. This is another day of watching and waiting to see whether the shuttle Columbia finally gets away on a long-awaited mission. This is the third try, and this time it's not mechanical gremlins keeping the Columbia on the launch pad. ABC's John Lyons reports from the Kennedy Space Center.
The space shuttle is all dressed up and ready to go, but the weather here and 3,000 miles away is holding her on the pad. If there were an emergency early in the flight, Columbia might need to land at Dakar, Senegal, or Morón, Spain. Right now, the visibility at both those places is not good enough for landing. The weather is also not good enough for an emergency landing here at the Kennedy Space Center. But NASA is hopeful. They're aiming now for another attempt to launch sometime in the next hour. John Lyons, ABC News at the Kennedy Space Center.
The crew has been aboard the shuttle 3 hours now, waiting for skies to clear. Congressman Bill Nelson of Florida is along on this mission. He told members of the launch team as he climbed aboard the Columbia this morning, "Let's do it today." Right now, it all depends on the weather. Columbia is still on the launch pad at the Kennedy Space Center. NASA had hoped to get it away nearly 2 hours ago. Mechanically, everything looks fine, but ABC's John Lyons says today it's the weather.
Columbia is ready to go, and launch controllers are holding her back, waiting for weather to improve at emergency landing sites in Spain and Africa. They'll be able to hold only until 9:33 a.m. Eastern Time. If they don't make launch today, NASA is saying the earliest they'd be able to try again would be Thursday morning. They're reporting Columbia itself is in great shape. The astronauts on board say they've loosened their seat belts to make things a little more comfortable while they wait. John Lyons, ABC News at the Kennedy Space Center.
This is the third time they've tried for a liftoff on this mission. Last month, the computer shut everything down just 14 seconds before the engines were to start, and yesterday there was a problem with a valve. Now today it's the weather. They've only got a little more than a half hour before NASA will have to decide on another postponement. I'll have more after this.
Network News, the Space Shuttle Columbia, no-go again. I'm Sam Litzinger. The AP's Dick Iuliano is with us live from the Kennedy Space Center. Dick, what went wrong today?
Bad weather here at the Kennedy Space Center, foul weather in Africa and Europe. Now, you may wonder, why does it matter whether weather is good in Europe or Africa? But these are emergency landing sites that the shuttle requires. If it needs to make an emergency landing across the Atlantic, it would choose sites in either Africa or Europe. Both these runways were obscured by very bad weather. One of them, Dakar, Senegal, had only 1 mile of visibility. The other one, Morón, Spain, was described as being socked in with low cloudiness. Here at the Kennedy Space Center, astronaut Paul Weiss is the weather astronaut for this mission. He's been the only astronaut doing any flying today in a NASA training jet plane, continually performing touch-and-go landings on the runway, checking the return-to-launch site runway here at the Kennedy Space Center. And just a few moments ago, Weiss said scrub it, and that was the word that went to the firing room and also out to the astronauts. This shuttle mission will not go today. It will also not go tomorrow. There will be no attempt made tomorrow. Never before has NASA asked its launch team to attempt more than 3 countdowns over 3 consecutive days. So the next attempt to launch this 24th space shuttle mission, which would be the first of 1986, will be made Thursday morning. A lot of disappointment here, Sam.
I can bet. Well, NASA engineers are going to be very busy over the next few days. This has been a live special report from AP Network News. I'm Sam Litzinger, along with Dick Iuliano at the Kennedy Space Center. And this is the AP Radio Network.
News, I'm Joe Templeton. The Columbia has been refueled and the crew is strapped in ready for still another try this morning at getting the shuttle away on a 5-day mission. But ABC's John Lyons says again today weather's a problem and NASA officials are not very hopeful.
The suspicion is growing here that NASA is continuing to count only because they have the fuel and the astronauts on board, not that anybody believes Columbia will actually fly today. Earlier, weather people predicted a breathing space between 2 areas of rain. They're saying now that they don't see any space, that the 2 storms have merged and it'll rain right through the available time for launch today. It's believed that despite this, NASA will continue to count until time runs out at 9:33 Eastern Time, praying for a miracle. John Lyons, ABC News at the Kennedy Space Center.
The crew has climbed aboard the Columbia 3 times before on this mission, only to be returned to their quarters disappointed. If the shuttle does get up there this morning, the crew will release a communication satellite and perform more than a dozen experiments. But right now, the main task at hand is to get a go-ahead for a launch later this morning, and that depends on the weather, which is not good. I'll have more after this.
Shuttle Columbia still in the starting gate. A controversial execution carried out in South Carolina. The Soviet Union attacks Reagan's stand on Libya. Good morning, Bill Lynch with the CBS World News Roundup. Today is the 7th time that NASA has tried to launch its refurbished flagship Columbia on a 5-day science and satellite deployment mission. Frank Motek of Miami affiliate WINZ reports on the frustrating countdown.
Dark clouds and a steady rainfall are holding up the launch of the Columbia this morning. Despite the bleak forecast for the remainder of the morning, NASA managers say they're not ready to throw in the towel, and they're hoping for a let-up in the bad weather. The chance to launch Columbia this morning extends until 9:33 Eastern Time. If the weather holds up, today's launch would be a record 7th postponement for a shuttle mission. Columbia's crew, including Florida Congressman Bill Nelson, trekked to the launch pad in the steady rain early this morning in preparation for blastoff. The 7 astronauts have strapped themselves into Columbia 4 times, waiting for a go for launch. The weather held up Tuesday's launch try. Monday's delay and a postponement last month were caused by technical problems. Hanging above Columbia's entrance hatch today was a paper 4-leaf clover with the words "Good Luck" written on it. So far, it looks like Mother Nature and Lady Luck are not on NASA's side. Frank Motek for CBS News, Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
And each scrub launch attempt costs NASA about $250,000. It's 1.5 minutes past the hour.
From ABC News, I'm Joe Templeton. The crew and the Columbia were ready to go this morning, but again the weather has kept the shuttle on the launch pad. And just a few minutes ago, after watching the rain come down all morning, NASA decided to scrub today's launch. More from ABC's John Lyons at the Kennedy Space Center.
One of the main reasons they put the Kennedy Space Center here in Florida was the predominance of good weather. You'd not be able to sell that one to the Columbia crew this morning. They're sitting in their spaceship watching the rain stream across the windshield, meaning they can't fly. The weather forecasts say this kind of weather should continue through tomorrow and maybe clear up by Sunday morning. Columbia itself is in great shape, except that it's wet. NASA has reported no technical problems with the spaceship, and despite all the delays, the crew sounds like it's in good mood. John Lyons, ABC News at the Kennedy Space Center.
So now the crew members go back to their quarters. This is the 4th time they've climbed aboard the shuttle for this mission and had to climb out again a few hours later. One of those hoping to fly this time is Congressman Bill Nelson of Florida. He's chairman of the House panel that oversees NASA's budget. I'll have more after this.
CBS News, I'm Bill Whitney. 6 times the launch of Space Shuttle Columbia has been scuttled by bad weather or technical problems. This morning, in just under an hour, NASA will make launch attempt number 7. An update from Frank Motek of CBS radio affiliate WINZ.
Columbia is poised on the launch pad, bathed in bright spotlights as all continues to go smoothly toward a pre-dawn launch at 6:55 Eastern Time this morning. The weather forecast for launch time at the Cape looks excellent. The 7 shuttle astronauts boarded Columbia for the 5th time earlier this morning in hopes of finally blasting into orbit after a record number of launch postponements caused by weather and technical problems. NASA managers are convinced that the technical bugs have been worked out of the refurbished shuttle, and optimism is running high that today Columbia will launch NASA on the most ambitious year ever for the shuttle program. If all goes as planned, Columbia's astronauts will deploy a communications satellite and conduct scientific experiments during their 5-day mission. At the moment, it's so far so good as Columbia prepares to try again. Frank Motek for CBS News, Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
7 tries in there. It looks like we're going to do it today. We're 2 minutes now.
2 minutes and counting.
2 minutes now away from the launch of Columbia, and it looks like it's really going to happen.
Let's go for ET LH2 pressurization.
This mission has been really snake bit. 6 times before they have scheduled a launch attempt. 6 times they have failed, a combination of weather and technical problems. But it looks like it's going to finally get off today.
2 seconds and counting.
It's dark in Florida right now. The sun just beginning to rise.
The ground launch sequencer will verify that the shuttle main engines are ready to start.
And it looks like we're really going to make it. The really frustrating thing is that we've got a bunch of kids from Booker T. Washington High School here in Houston who have a couple of experiments on board the Columbia.
1 minute, 26 seconds away now from the launch of Mission 61C.
And it's been very tough on them.
Time at 6:55.
To get so close. They came, in fact, within 14 seconds one time back in December. They've traveled to Florida. They've traveled down to the Johnson Space Center so many times. This time it looks like it's finally going to get off. We're just over a minute away from the launch now. This is going to be about a 5-day mission. It's the youngest crew to ever fly on a shuttle
1 minute
mission.
and counting. Sound suppression water system is now armed.
And we've got a number of experiments on board. One satellite to launch. It's what they're calling
50 seconds and counting.
an end-of-year clearance flight. A bunch of small scientific packages on board as well. Camera work, some Comet Halley monitoring program work, material sciences, and
Coming up on T-minus 31 seconds and go for auto sequence start.
They'll be studying the effects of zero gravity on stored blood, which would be something they'd probably want to have in a space
Let's go
station.
for auto sequence start.
Have a ground launch sequencer go for auto sequence start. Columbia's general purpose computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
23 seconds away from the launch. It looks like we're really going to make it this time.
Everything is go. The orbiter's onboard computers have armed the SRB ignition hold down post and T0 umbilical.
13
12 seconds.
10.
T-minus 10. Go for engine start.
7.
T-minus 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition, and we have liftoff. Liftoff of Columbia, mission 61C, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
All right, they made it this time.
Mission controlling now.
Columbia's ready to roll.
Roger, roll, Columbia. The crew in the ground acknowledging the roll program. A good roll, 73 degrees, puts the ship on the proper attitude for the flight downrange with wings level and astronauts heads down.
And the Columbia heading up into the sky. The sun is just rising. It looks like actually the sun is coming up very fast as Columbia shoots up into the sky. And if you heard those mission controllers, don't think that they're getting used to this kind of thing. They are so happy to get this one off.
On the right end.
Columbia.
Roger, we copy.
Columbia now rolling over onto its back.
Step down now to 85%.
And we've got a bright light up in the sky trailing the cloud of smoke behind.
That problem isolated by pilot Charlie Bolden not to impact the ascent phase. Engine still running smoothly at 85, now stepping down to 67% as shock wave builds up in the vehicle.
It's one of the more unusual sights.
Of maximum dynamic pressure on the vehicle.
From the shuttle, you can't see the shuttle. All you can see is the bright light with the smoke trailing behind.
Houston, go with throttle up.
Roger, Fred. Go to throttle up. Right.
At 1 minute 25 seconds, all main engines back at 104% of rated thrust and operating smoothly.
We had a slight problem with the engine there.
4,000 feet per second, altitude 13 miles, distance downrange 12 miles.
We had a slight problem with the engine. They had to cut it back to 85% and then 67, but they're back up to 104%.
102, 106% of hydraulic pressure.
So that
running smoothly.
That will not be causing any trouble.
Great.
Great is the word. And we've got time for the solid rocket booster separation.
Flight velocity 5,500 feet per second, altitude. That call precursor to solid rocket separation, which is now occurring and occurs nominally.
And it looks like number 7 is there.
Right on time at 2 minutes, 6 seconds.
Number 7, the lucky number for NASA today. We finally get the Columbia up on the 7th try. And a bunch of happy students, I'm sure, from Booker T. Washington High School. We'll be talking to them later on. From the Johnson Space Center, Sue Davis, KTRH News Radio 740.
Well, very good news, Sue. We will check back with you.
From ABC News, I'm Roger Skibinis. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Another try this morning at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and it worked for the Space Shuttle Columbia and its 7-man crew. Here's ABC's John Lyons.
T-minus 6, 5,
started.
4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition. We have liftoff. Liftoff of Columbia, mission 61C. And the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Climbing straight up into a spectacular Florida dawn. On the 5th try, they get it right. Columbia begins her 7th flight into space. No congressman has ever left his district quite like Bill Nelson is leaving his right now.
The crew's primary mission is to launch a $50 million satellite owned by RCA. NASA is being paid $14 million to put the satellite into space. Today's launch comes just in the nick of time. Had it not gotten off by Monday at the latest, it would have disrupted other missions scheduled for what will be a very busy year in space for the United States. This morning's successful launch follows other attempted liftoffs, the first attempt last December. And I'll have more after this.
After 6 planned launch dates came and went due to a variety of technical problems and bad weather, attempt number 7 at 5:55 Houston time this morning, just a few minutes ago, was finally successful, much to the obvious delight of those NASA workers.
-10, go for engine start. 7, T-minus 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition. We have liftoff. Liftoff at Columbia, mission 61C, and the shuttle has cleared the power.
This 5-day mission features the youngest shuttle crew ever, and besides all the usual satellite launchings and scientific work, this mission also has 2 experiments prepared by students at Houston's Booker T. Washington High School. At the Johnson Space Center, Sue Davis, KTRH, News Radio 740.
CBS News, I'm Bill Whitney. Up, and away. Earthbound Space Shuttle Columbia finally found a loophole in the law of gravity this morning. A report from Frank Motek of CBS radio affiliate WINZ.
NASA managers are finally exclaiming Happy New Year following the spectacular pre-dawn launch of the Shuttle Columbia on the first mission of 1986. Shuttle launch director Gene Thomas says loud cheers and applause broke out in the control room when Columbia finally lifted off.
We had predicted that from the top row where we sit, and it was probably since STS-1, I don't remember the noise, the clapping, and the yelling being that loud.
Columbia blasted off right on time today, leaving behind a record number of launch postponements. The 7 astronauts on board Columbia, including Florida Congressman Bill Nelson, whose district includes the Kennedy Space Center, will release a communication satellite later today and conduct a variety of scientific experiments. Columbia is scheduled to return to the Florida spaceport at the end of its 5-day mission. Frank Motek for CBS News, Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
CBS News, I'm Charles Osgood. In Shuttle Columbia up, and now there may be delays getting it down. Poor weather is the question mark right now. Just an hour and a half before Columbia is scheduled to land in Florida. Frank Motek is standing by at the Kennedy Space Center with an update. Frank?
Well, it's getting down to the wire for NASA managers who are waiting till the last minute to decide if the weather will be acceptable for a landing at the Florida spaceport this morning. Light showers and scattered clouds at the landing site here are causing the big question mark on whether Columbia will be permitted to land at 8:28 Eastern Time as scheduled. If the green light is not given for today, Columbia will have to make a landing here, or at least a try for a landing here tomorrow morning at the Kennedy Space Center. NASA wanted to cut Columbia's originally scheduled 5-day mission short by 1 day because of concern about preparing the orbiter for its next mission in March, and because of a pesky problem on a Halley's Comet experiment. A final decision on a landing this morning is expected in just minutes from now. Frank Motek for CBS News, Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
CBS News, I'm Carol Pozevsky. The Space Shuttle Columbia is scheduled to touch down in about 2 hours, but the weather continues to be a big if. NASA says the options will be assessed in the next hour and a landing decision made. The options are land in Florida this morning on schedule, land at California's Edwards Air Force Base later today, land at Edwards tomorrow morning. NASA says a Florida landing is much preferred.
If there's any way to land at the Cape, we will, because it will place a great burden on the launch team here to turn Columbia around in time to meet the Astro launch window on March the 6th. If we have to go to Edwards, we lose 5 days worth of time. So obviously we're going to study the weather very carefully to see if there's any way we can get into the Cape, because Edwards would create a headache for us.
NASA spokesman George Diller. More news right after this.
CBS News, I'm Bill Lynch.
The 1986 Space Shuttle schedule has just suffered a major setback with the rerouting of orbiter Columbia. Frank Motek reports from the Kennedy Space Center.
At the moment, the 7 Space Shuttle astronauts are preparing Columbia for landing at Edwards Air Force Base in California, now set for 8:39 Eastern Time this morning. The flight director waved the shuttle away from the Kennedy Space Center this morning because of scattered clouds and showers at the landing site. Shuttle managers did not want to land at Edwards Air Force Base on this mission because the California landing would scramble an already very tight shuttle schedule. Columbia's next flight is set for March 6th, and there are only a few days in which to get the shuttle off the pad in order to put it in a position to observe Halley's Comet. A decision again came this morning just before the astronauts were to begin firing braking rockets to start the spaceship's descent into the Earth's atmosphere. California, here Columbia comes. Frank Motek for CBS News, Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
CBS News, I'm Bill Whitney. NASA officials are expected to announce within minutes whether the delayed landing of Space Shuttle Columbia will be made at Kennedy Space Center in Florida or later this morning at Edwards Air Force Base in California. It all depends on the weather. We get the latest from Frank Motek of CBS radio affiliate WINZ at the Cape.
The 7 astronauts aboard Columbia have for the 3rd day in a row stowed their equipment and packed their bags, waiting to find out where they'll be landing. NASA managers are hoping the clouds and showers around the Florida landing strip will clear away to allow Columbia to touch down at the Kennedy Space Center. The word on whether Columbia has a chance to land in Florida is expected in just minutes from now. If the weather does not clear up in time for a planned 7:32 Eastern Time landing at the Florida Spaceport, NASA managers plan to bring Columbia home to Edwards Air Force Base in California at 8:59 Eastern Time this morning. The shuttle flight director yesterday ordered Columbia to remain in orbit for a 6th day after the weather spoiled 2 attempts to bring Columbia home to Florida. Frank Motek for CBS News, Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
CBS News. This is Rob Armstrong.
Columbia, Houston. Houston's okay. Go ahead, Fred. Okay, guys, we're going to do a 1-orbit extension. We're going to go to Edwards.
Yet another problem for Columbia. Mission Control giving the news to the shuttle crew that the weather is too marginal at Florida's Kennedy Space Center, and the shuttle will return to California's Edwards Air Force Base instead. Dave Zorn of CBS radio station KNX in Los Angeles is at Edwards. Dave, how's the weather there?
Rob, the weather could not be better for a pre-dawn touchdown in the California desert. Clear skies, practically no wind, and about 40 degrees right now. Giant searchlights have turned night into day on the Dry Lake runway, so Commander Robert Hoot Gibson should have no trouble at all finding the landing strip in just less than 2 hours. Weather will not be a problem here, Rob.
Reporter Dave Zorn of Los Angeles station KNX at Edwards Air Force Base. For the shuttle Columbia, another delay at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Frank Motek of CBS Radio Miami affiliate WINZ has been following the saga of Columbia. Frank, what is this latest hitch in this mission likely to mean down the road? Columbia is scheduled to be launched again March 6th.
Well, Rob, NASA spokesmen say the ground support team, both here and in California, will have to work fast and furious in hopes of bringing Columbia back to the Kennedy Space Center. They hope to bring Columbia back here on a piggyback ride atop a 747 in 4 days instead of the usual 6. That will require lots of work. In fact, crews are being sent out right now to California in hopes of speeding that up. It's still unclear if Columbia will be ready for a launch on March 6th or 7th in hopes of studying Halley's Comet. Right now, there's been no change in plans to launch the shuttle Challenger next Saturday on a mission featuring the first teacher in space.
Frank Motek of Miami station WINZ at Florida's Kennedy Space Center. To repeat, the Space Shuttle Columbia is now scheduled to return to Earth in about 2 hours at California's Edwards Air Force Base. More news in a minute.
Space Shuttle Columbia waved off from Cape Canaveral. The Soviets pressed their arms elimination plan and a conditional clean bill of health for President Reagan. This is Bill Whitney with the CBS World News Roundup. Murphy's Law that anything can go wrong has been applied once more to the current Space Shuttle mission. The landing, already delayed, won't be in Florida after all. The latest from Bill Whitaker.
It's on to California for the Space Shuttle Columbia. For the third straight day, heavy cloud cover prevented the orbiter from landing at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. NASA had wanted to bring Columbia back to Florida to facilitate getting it ready for its next mission in early March. Now, the California landing could delay that flight and even possibly disrupt NASA's ambitious 15-launch schedule this year. This mission of Columbia has been plagued by delays from the very beginning. Bad weather and mechanical problems held up the launch 7 times, setting the record as the most delayed ever launch. And now, with 2 missed landing dates, it also holds the record for the most delayed.
This is a live special report from AP Network News. Columbia comes home. Good morning to you. I'm Bob Moon at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, along with Steve Futterman at Edwards Air Force Base in California. And at this hour, the Space Shuttle Columbia is coming home. It began with a record number of launch postponements and is ending after a record number of landing delays. The third strike came this morning when they gave it one last shot, but the clouds failed to part and the landing was waved off to California instead. Good thing dawn has revealed murky gray skies here. Steve Futterman is standing by in California. Steve, dawn hasn't even arrived there yet.
No, Bob, it's still dark here in the California desert. Columbia now making its final turnabout over Edwards Air Force Base, less than 7 miles away from landing. Everything appears to be going smoothly. We've heard the traditional sonic boom, which announces the arrival of Columbia. Everything appears to be okay. They just said that the surface winds are calm here at Edwards Air Force Base. The runway 22, has been lit by 4 huge, powerful floodlights, each with 800 million candle power. Give you an idea how strong they are. So one of those floodlights is the equal of 800 million candles. Everything, like I said, appears to be going smoothly. Commander Robert Gibson, pilot Charles Bolden, neither man has reported any difficulty. And now we're waiting for the descent. Columbia now just under 4,000 feet.
Altitude 1,300 feet.
A bit lower than we had said, and we heard missile control. Yeah, we're just waiting. We are not getting the usual pictures from the powerful cameras aboard the jet craft because of the early morning hours. The shuttle has landed twice before dawn, so this is maybe not what they would want. And here we have Columbia coming down the picture. The rear wheel's about to come down. It's very difficult to see. We're seeing the rear wheels about to touch down, looking for a bit of kick-up of dust. And now it appears Columbia is very close to coming down. It is down. Columbia is back, Bob.
And so, stirring up a cloud of dust in the Southern California darkness, Columbia rolling to a stop, safely back on Earth. Along with Steve Futterman at Edwards Air Force Base, I'm Bob Moon at the Kennedy Space Center. And this has been a live special report from AP Network News.
From ABC News, I'm Ralph Howard. It's back home again for the Space Shuttle Columbia. Just moments ago, Columbia landed safely at a dry lake bed at California's Edwards Air Force Base.
And we show touchdown at mission elapsed time, 6 days, 2 hours, 4 minutes, 9 seconds.
For 3 days, NASA was hoping to have Columbia land at Cape Canaveral. That would save the time and trouble of transporting Columbia back to Florida from California. But each time, bad weather got in the way. And today's landing at California may delay or even cancel the next Columbia mission set for March 6th. The space agency has a busy schedule of 14 more shuttle missions this year. I'll have more after this.